Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Preference. We are glad you made it. We have some exciting news to share with you about some potential changes regarding benefits. So make sure you hang on and listen. Now, look, even if this does not specifically affect you, it could. And this is the type of stuff that sends a message throughout the nation. Remember that there are state benefits and federal benefits. It's very important that you understand there's the two. And in some cases, one state might do something very stupid for veterans, and the other states watch. And then we see if we can undo that dumb mistake that that state decides, and all the other states watch. So it's a really important dynamic. Now, what I'm talking about here is in Virginia, there was a last minute push to get the bill signed for the budget. This was, I don't know, a month ago or a month and a half ago, whenever it was. And in the last moments, they threw in some provisions to eliminate educational benefits for surviving spouses, spouses of disabled veterans, dependents, Gold Star families, right? So it was a horrific little slide in that bill. And as expected, veterans found out about it. Arms went up. A lot of effort to talk about this has been really underway. And now we have some updates, and definitely wanted to go through this and see what is going on with regard to this. And I'm just going to read the headline, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this dilemma in Virginia and where you think this is going to go. So, Virginia House lawmakers repeal change to disabled veterans tuition program. Will work on new deal. Look, here we are, right? It's political stuff. Of course, they work on what deal. Okay, what's the new? Should be replaced. Like, go back, just get rid of it and go back to how it was, because it was pretty awesome. So they're going to work on a new deal. What are your guys' thoughts? Randy, how about you?
Well, I'm glad they're working on a new deal. I hate that, a second deal, which, dropped benefits, kind of came out of nowhere. Virginia does have some generous benefits, as well it should, for its veterans, particularly centering around education. What I have a concern with here is the process. This initial trimming of benefits, and it was substantial. We're not, going to go into the whole backstory here, but it kind of caught a lot of veterans off guard. And Virginia is a veteran heavy state. There's a number of military installations. I, for one, was stationed there at one point in my career. So I was really surprised, especially given the political climate in Virginia, which tends to be, favorable to veterans, that they would do something like this. Now, before I throw it over to Chris, I want to make a point. This article, and we will leave a link to it below, is, pointing that they're kind of putting the toothpaste back in the tube. They're trying to undo something that became very, very politically unpopular very quickly in an election year. So I think that that's a good thing. It's just concerning that it happened in the first place. If there's concerns around the budget, which is where all of this comes from, I don't think that the one-stop shop should be the back of veterans to balance a budget. It just doesn't seem like a very fair, particularly without a really robust public debate. And, I know there's people that are going to say, well, these are elected legislatures and they followed their procedures and blah, 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 blah. When you have as many veterans caught off guard as you did with these shenanigans, there's a problem with process. So that's my initial take. I'm going to throw it down to Chris and let you chime in here.
Yeah, I mean, this is the come on, man. Like, what were you thinking type moment. And I mean, I get it. There's the cost of the programs increased over the years, probably because people become aware of it. People figure out how to leverage the benefits. So maybe it didn't fit into their financial plans. But generally speaking, that's why you run a budget. That's why you go through the voting process. And that's why you get to a point to where you don't get to the last minute and just start dumping programs on, especially on veterans. Right. So Yeah, this was a moment that I'm sure all of them would like to take back. Maybe it just seemed a little bit too convenient. And look, I mean, to give them the benefit of the doubt, this article doesn't show other places where they had to make tough cuts either. So look, I'm coming from the private industry side. You never get what you want. You always start with more. I get it. Times are tough. But yeah, this is probably something that people like to go back in time on and relook and rethink before they make such a goofy move.
I agree. Absolutely, Chris. And I think that I would be very surprised if the governor actually knew fully what was in it. I mean, look, these people don't read everything. They rely on their staffers, the staffer that deals with this, the staffer that deals with that. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? Everything looks good on my side type of stuff, typically. But, so it's either the staffer who said that that's a great idea. That sucks. So the good idea fairy has landed again, right? If in fact it was the governor who actually knew full well that he was signing this, shame on him, right? Now, here's an interesting number that I want to throw out to you guys. Every state is different, right? Depending on the amount of veterans that are in them. But veterans bring in a financial, economic component to the states. I've talked about it before with you guys. Virginia specifically, let's just talk about compensation, okay? Just VA compensation, not post 9/11 GI Bill, not VRNE, not retirement, not pensions, none of the other stuff. Just disability compensation. In Virginia, there's 600, almost 700,000 veterans. Of that amount, of almost 250,000 veterans are receiving VA compensation. So money in their bank, and where are they spending it? In their state, mostly, right? You want to know how much money VA compensation brings into that state? Almost $6 billion a year. $6 billion a year into that state. And guess what? Governors of small states, beware. It's not hard to jump the border and go live in a veteran-friendly state. I'm just saying. So if the veterans leave your state, they're taking that money with them. And not only that.
You do know anybody that may have done that recently?
No, heck yeah, man. Yes, absolutely. And it's a real thing, man. And it gets even more real in the small states where it's like, I live on the border of 3 different states. I could just, easily and live in the same environment, have the same friends, and do all of that. So instead of stabbing veterans in the eye with legislation, bad moves, they should be doing stuff to attract veterans and retain veterans in their states, in my opinion. Anyway, let's jump back into this, see what they're doing here. So the House of Delegates voted unanimously to repeal changes, okay, good, to a program that provides free tuition to families of those killed on active duty or who are at least 90% disabled. Now, look, I'm going to throw this out there. I get they're trying to save money. To Randy's point, not on the back of a veteran. Generous education bill program was in place. It's gone now. Now they're trying to bring it back, of 90% rated veterans. A lot of states out there, they want you to be 100%. Some states don't care. Some have different levels, especially when it comes to spouses. So to have such a sweeping, just from a 90% and above qualify to nobody, instead of stair-stepping it and just going like, we're going to get rid of the 90%, you have to be 100% now, I'm sorry, approach seemed really weird to me. What do you guys have any thoughts on just that big jump and not anything in between?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a little bit about it on this channel before. I find the percentage and the term disabled, both sides of that equation, to be really problematic. I know that they're done for rational reasons, but ultimately, when you have as many state agencies and state governments relying on that criteria and, you know, that sort of vernacular to make decisions about veterans, it becomes problematic. And I know that, you know, this all flows from the VA, and they have their reasons for doing it, but you know, not something that I'm a fan of, because to Jason's point, you end up in these weird, you know, sort of stair steps of benefits that are divergent between states. And it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. You know, I know we all like numbers. The human mind, you know, kind of zeroes in on things on a piece of paper that have to do with numbers, but I think it confuses the matter. And I think that there's a better way to do it. So that's me, Chris. I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I mean, to pick on the people who are 90% disabled or were killed in action, the families of those people, like, if you want to do something, save a little scratch, you know, look at your program, understand why it's running the way it's running, why the costs have increased, and then make the adjustments accordingly. But still, you've made promises to veterans that you're not keeping. That's some bad mojo right there. You know, it's easy to bust on California for a lot of things, but the California tuition fee waiver is actually an excellent program. And, you know, they step it up depending upon percentages of disability ratings, and they do special things for folks in this category that we're talking about here today. And that can't be cheap. Right. So, but if you think about it, and what Jason was saying, not only keeping people in the state and benefiting from their buying power and, you know, other mechanisms, it keeps the children in the state, generally speaking, too. And so every state is short of highly qualified workers. And so now you got people whose kids are going to schools, getting degrees, and joining the workforce. And, you know, so it just seems like it was very, very, very short-minded thinking here.
Yeah, I agree. Let's read through this a little bit, see what the next steps are, and then we'll kind of talk it through a little bit. So it says here that dozens of veterans and family members were in the gallery while the House voted delegates to completely repeal the changes, right? The House then voted to add back $20 million a year that was included in the budget to help public universities offset the cost of the program, which serves more than 6,000 veterans and their families. So we got the dollar amount, 20 million. Again, remember, veterans are bringing in $6 billion into the state. I'm a veteran myself, and so making sure that we take care of our veterans is my highest priority. Speaker of the House, Don Scott, stated. Moves on here. Governor Glenn Youngkin called a special session of the legislature after public outcry, and that's to say lightly. There was petitions. There was a lot of pressure after this thing was found out. So he called a special session of the legislature after the public outcry from veterans groups when the cuts were passed as part of the state budget in May without a separate public hearing. Back to your guys' point of there should have been something. You know, I mean, this is you shouldn't just do that. So though Youngkin signed the changes as part of the budget, he ended up calling for a complete repeal and created a state task force to look at potential cuts. We'll look at what the governor's task force says and what changes, if any, are necessary, Scott said. Meanwhile, the Senate has wrestled with keeping some of the changes in place. The cost of the program rose from $12 million in 2019 to $65 million in 2023. The Senate set up its own subcommittee to look at changing the program. The committee took testimony Friday from veterans and the families of first responders who are disabled or were killed in the line of duty, who are also covered under the program. So they also included first responders, which a lot of places do that. Good for Virginia for doing that. California, I don't think does, just as an example. But you know, the more you add, the more it costs. So moving on here, there's only a couple more little small tiny paragraphs, and then we'll talk about it. Ella Hester, 20 years old of Virginia Beach, told the Senate subcommittee, or excuse me, the Senate committee, that college may be unaffordable if she and her brother become ineligible for the program. Both her parents were in the military. Her mother suffers from PTSD. I'll be in massive amounts of debt, as well as I'm sure these other families who were promised this benefit. The Senate is scheduled to return Monday, July 1st. That's now, right? I mean, this is happening now. Lawmakers could bring the session to a close if they choose to pass the repeal language approved by the House of Delegates or vote on their own bill, which would trigger a round of negotiations with leaders in the House. So I want to get your thoughts, Chris, and then we'll bounce it over to Randy and go from there.
Well, I mean, the good thing is that they're getting all over it, and so hopefully there'll be some resolution in the near future. But this goes back to making promises you don't keep, especially, for purposes that I'm sure there's a lot of other things that they could have cut that would have been less purposeful than what this program does for people who are service oriented. And it's great to hear that they've included first responders in here, but maybe that's also why the thing ballooned up. So, maybe a little bit better budget planning, maybe a little bit better, leadership there. But it's ex post facto, but it looks like maybe there's a chance for them to do the right thing here.
I think this whole thing is asinine. Should have never happened in the first place. I mean, really, this is, when we get into the realm of stupid, this whole situation should be the poster boy for the definition of stupid in the dictionary. Let's go back and look at some of the language here. They're talking about here outcry from a veterans groups when these cuts were passed as part of a state budget in May without a separate public hearing. So, this whole good idea fairy visited whoever was cooking this up in a smoke-filled room somewhere in Virginia because they thought it'd be a great idea to save money, and they kind of zeroed in on veterans. What I would say to two different groups of people watching this, those in Virginia watching this channel, hold the people that cook this up responsible. We have elections for a reason. Some of them may or may not be up for election this year, but there is absolutely no reason why they should not, at least have to explain themselves to the public, if not, really possibly lose your vote. So that's kind of my first point. The second point is those of you outside of Virginia, look how quick your benefits can disappear if we don't. That's why we do this channel, guys. Look how quick benefits can be erased with a magic wand because of a bunch of really smart people who think they're geniuses in Richmond, Virginia, cooking up ideas. It could happen in your state. It could happen just about anywhere. So you've got to keep your eye on this, guys, because these little sneaky moves are out there, and they happen in just about every state if we don't, keep our eye on the ball. Look what happened when there was an outcry from the public, as well there should have been. The House of Delegates vote was unanimous. Like, oh my God, I don't want to have my name on this anymore. There was nobody that was willing to say, you know what, this was a great idea. Back in May when we did this, let's keep it in place because we thought through it. We reached out to the public. Our constituents were behind it. It was genius. All of those people scurried under a rock, and nobody wants anything to do with it right now. So that ought to tell you something about public outcry. Think about the cost here. They're talking about $65 million in 2023. Well, fine and dandy. That's a lot of money. I get it. But, depending on what source you read, the Virginia budget is somewhere in the neighborhood of $85 billion. Think about the difference in number of zeros there. I mean, it's just astronomical. So this is a tiny, tiny fix to their overall budget. And they zeroed in on a vulnerable group and tried to make a small move to the budget needle, through this vulnerable group, veterans, especially disabled veterans. You wonder why the cost of education is going up there in Virginia. Well, how in the hell much has the education at the University of Virginia or Virginia Tech gone up between 2019 and 2023 when they cite these numbers?
Yeah.
You guys wonder, there in the House of Delegates in Virginia, why this program is costing more and more and more. Why don't you take a little look at how much people are paying for tuition? That's probably a big part of it. And there's nothing wrong with veterans using their benefits. So, that's.
Well, and there's still a $45 million gap. If they're putting $20 million back in, and it costs $65 million in 2023. So,
yeah,
I mean, the reality is that this isn't back to normal. But there's still going to be some cuts somewhere if they don't put enough money back in the budget to actually cover the true costs of the program. So net, even if all this work happens and they figure out how to unscrew this thing, the benefits are probably still going to be less than what they have been.
Yeah, I agree. I think the whole thing is just, I'm fired up right now. I mean, I think the whole thing is just asinine. Think about the generational impact that, being disabled from your service, either as a first responder or being in the military has. Your life is fundamentally altered by the time you get to 90% or 100% on the VA schedule. And I know we just talked about this, but your life looks different, and it's going to look different for your kids, and there's going to be an impact on them. And you served your country or your community if you're a first responder. And now they're talking about taking away benefits that are designed to mitigate some of that impact that's going to be felt for generations to come because of your service and the injuries or illnesses that you sustained while you were performing that service. So, I'm going to get off my high horse here, but I think this whole thing was utterly asinine. And, legislatures that voted for it, beware, the public is going to politically revisit this when an election is held.
Right. Yeah, it'd be interesting to have some names come out, right? And I agree. Look, this never should have happened. It should have stopped at the governor's desk. And the governor needs to figure out who didn't inform. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I just can't see. I just can't see somebody thinking this is a smart move at a governor level. So with the benefit of the doubt, I'm going to say that he needs to figure out who should have said something, and that person should be gone. That's just not even acceptable in that realm. So the two big keys here, and I'm just going to reiterate one that you said, Randy, which is interesting. The House of Delegates, right? So you have two sides. It's kind of like the federal government has the House of Representatives and you have the Senate. Both need to come to an agreement, push it up to, in this case, the governor, right? So the House of Delegates voted unanimously, which is a great word, to repeal changes to the program. So that's just reverse it, act like it never happened, right? Put it back to how it was. However, as you read through this, down back toward the bottom, it says, and this is the call to action to those in Virginia. Meanwhile, the Senate has wrestled with keeping some of the changes in place. Okay, that's not good, right? Because that's not full repeal. That's, well, maybe you got to pay half of it, or maybe you got to whatever. Who knows what it is? You need to reach out to your senators in that state, whoever they are, and tell them that they need to repeal it from the constituent level. You need to call from your zip code that's in their voting district and let them know your thoughts. Not just you, your spouse, your children, your grandma, whoever, right? The more people that call and voice, the better. That's the call to action there. With that, let's go ahead and wrap it up. I appreciate everybody watching. We appreciate every single one of you. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.